The beacon went off at 0743 station time, and every screen in my office lit up at once. Not most of them. Not the important ones. Every single screen. For one strange second, the room looked brighter than daylight. 47 incoming channels flashed across the walls, the desk surface, and the suspended displays above my workstation. 47 different priority requests. 47 different species. I was holding half a sandwich. I remember that detail, because everything after it happened too fast. I set the sandwich down and stared at the screens. Something was wrong. Not dangerous wrong. Not yet. But important. The kind of importance that changes the direction of weeks, months, sometimes entire civilizations. My name is Kale Voss, lead human ambassador to the Galactic Council. For 11 years I had worked aboard Concord Station, a diplomatic structure positioned in neutral space between hundreds of competing governments. It was the closest thing the galaxy possessed to a shared political center. In 11 years, I had learned something useful. When everyone calls at once, the emergency is rarely what people think it is. The first channel opened automatically. Ambassador Kale of the Sorith Collective appeared on the screen. Sorith were famous for emotional control. Their species approached communication the way mathematicians approached equations. Every statement is measured. Every reaction is calculated. My tail looked disturbed. His secondary eyelids were fully open. For Sorith, that was the equivalent of visible panic. Ambassador Voss, he said, you need to read the council bulletin immediately. The channel closed before I could answer. Another connection opened. Then another. Then another. Delegates spoke over each other. Some sounded concerned. Some sounded confused. A few sounded almost sympathetic. That last category bothered me most. Experienced diplomats become sympathetic only when they believe someone is about to lose something important. I opened the council bulletin feed. The headline sat at the top of the page. Simple, clean, almost casual. Formal declaration of hostile intent. Breath Dominion versus Earth Sector 7. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time. The words remained exactly the same. The Breath Dominion had formally declared hostile intent against humanity. Not a trade dispute. Not sanctions. Not diplomatic pressure. A legal declaration under the prior claim protocol. An ancient section of council law, so outdated that most delegates treated it as historical decoration. For 400 years nobody had used it. Until now. I leaned back slowly. The Breath Dominion controlled 12 star systems. They were not one of the great powers, but they were established, wealthy, and militarily respected. Humanity, meanwhile, had existed in wider galactic space for only 80 years. 80 years. To many civilizations, that was effectively infancy. The declaration listed its reasoning with bureaucratic precision. Earth occupied strategically valuable territory. Human expansion remained insufficiently regulated. Human military capability was assessed as limited. Humanity possessed no recognized alliance network. Minimal resistance expected. Matter expected to conclude within one standard cycle. That final line sat on the screen like an insult, disguised as paperwork. Minimal resistance. I laughed once. Not because it was funny, because I knew exactly how many people on Earth would react badly to those two words. The channels kept blinking. 47 voices waiting for answers. I accepted another call. Counselor Bree appeared. Unlike Tail, she did not look surprised. She looked tired. Bree represented one of the oldest civilizations in Council history. Her people had explored space, while human ancestors were still discovering agriculture. She studied me silently. Kale, she said. The use of my first name immediately caught my attention. In 11 years, she had never used it. Many members of this council do not support what has happened. How many? A pause. Most. I waited. Then she said the part that mattered. "We are concerned for Earth's civilian population." There it was, the assumption beneath every conversation, the assumption beneath every blinking channel, the assumption beneath every careful expression. Humanity had already lost. The only remaining question, in their minds, was how painful the aftermath would be. I thanked her and ended the call. The office became quiet. For 30 seconds I did nothing. No screens, no messages, no reports, just silence. I let myself feel the anger, not outrage. Don't panic. Anger, a calm, cold version of it, the kind that settles deep instead of exploding. Then I locked it away. Emotion was useful, but the information was better. I opened a secure channel to Earth. Deputy Director Clara Holt answered immediately. She looked exhausted, which meant she had probably been awake since before the declaration reached public channels. "You saw it," she said. "I saw it. The Prime Council received it 14 minutes ago." "How bad?" Her expression changed slightly. That tiny movement told me more than words. "They're not panicking," she said. I felt something loosen inside my chest. "Good. They're angry." That was even better, because panic wastes energy. Anger organizes it. I stood and moved toward the viewport overlooking the station exterior. Stars filled the darkness beyond the glass. Ancient, silent, unconcerned. "I need everything," I said. "Historical archives? Yes. Defense assessments? Yes. Infrastructure reports? Yes. All of it. All of it." Clara nodded once. For 6 years we had worked together. She knew when a conversation had moved beyond explanation. "They think they understand humanity," I said quietly. "They don't. I know. I need the Council to understand exactly what they challenged." The answer came immediately. "I'll have it within the hour." The connection ended. I looked down at the sandwich, still sitting on my desk, untouched, forgotten. Normal life, interrupted by history. Outside the viewport, stars burned quietly against the darkness. Somewhere far away, the Breath Dominion believed they had started a short conflict. Somewhere on Earth, millions of ordinary people were reading the Declaration for the first time. And somewhere deep inside the calculations of every experienced observer in the galaxy, humanity had already been placed into the losing column. I looked at the waiting channels. Then I opened the next one. The galaxy had made its decision. Now it was humanity's turn to respond. The council chamber was full. That alone told me how seriously everyone was taking the situation. 212 seats curved upward around the central floor, representing every recognized spacefaring civilization in this region of the galaxy. Most sessions never filled more than half those seats. Today every chair was occupied. Delegates who normally attended remotely had traveled in person. Observers packed the upper galleries. Analysts filled translation booths. News services watched from authorized media platforms. The Breath Dominion had managed something remarkable. They had turned an obscure legal declaration into the single most discussed political event in the galaxy. I stood near the entrance and watched the room settle. The atmosphere reminded me of a funeral where nobody had yet decided whether they were mourning the deceased or merely waiting for confirmation. Conversations remained quiet. Eyes followed me as I crossed the chamber. Not hostile eyes, concerned eyes, careful eyes. The same expressions I had been seeing since the declaration appeared. People thought they were being kind. That somehow made it worse. Near the center section sat Ambassador Draven Kirsch of the Breath Dominion. He looked relaxed, composed, confidence. 6 mouths arranged in 2 rows curved upward in identical smiles. He spoke casually with his aides. No tension, no uncertainty, no visible concern. Why would there be? From his perspective, the outcome was already determined. Earth was young. Breath was established. The numbers seemed obvious. I took my seat. The session began. Routine business disappeared quickly. Nobody had traveled across multiple star systems to discuss shipping regulations. The Declaration dominated everything. When my turn finally arrived, the chamber became noticeably quieter. I stood, straightened my jacket, opened the file Clara had spent the entire night assembling. Then I looked around the room. 212 faces. 212 different civilizations. Most of them expect a defensive speech. Perhaps a plea. Maybe a request for intervention. Instead, I began somewhere else. Members of the Galactic Council, I said, I would like to provide context. A few delegates exchanged glances. Context was not what they expected, not regarding the declaration itself. I continued. Regarding the species it was filed against. Nobody interrupted. Good. I opened the first section. What I am about to present is a public historical record. Every document is available for independent review. Nothing has been altered. Nothing has been omitted. I paused. Then I said the sentence that shifted the room. I am going to explain what humans survive. Not what humans build. Not what humans invent. Not what humans achieve. What humans survive. The distinction mattered, because achievement can be measured. Survival reveals character. I began with Earth's ice ages, not the technical details. The consequences: entire ecosystems collapsing, food chains failing, habitable regions shrinking, species disappearing. And yet humans adapted. They moved. They learned. They changed faster than circumstances demanded. When one solution failed, they built another. When one environment became hostile, they found a different one. The delegates listened politely. Interesting history. Nothing more. Then I moved to disease. That changed things. Many advanced civilizations had never experienced recurring global pandemics. Some had eliminated major illnesses before reaching industrial development. Others evolved in environments that naturally limited transmission. Human history was different. Repeated outbreaks, repeated losses, repeated recoveries. I watched expressions change as casualty figures appeared on shared displays. Millions, tens of millions, entire generations affected. Yet every time humanity is rebuilt, not eventually, immediately, the moment recovery became possible, they rebuilt economies, governments, institutions, communities. Again and again. Several delegates stopped taking notes. They were listening now. Really listening. I continued. Wars. Not glorified. Not celebrated. Simply presented. Scale. Duration. Consequences. Humanity had repeatedly survived conflicts that should have shattered civilization permanently. Instead, those conflicts produced new systems, new agreements, new structures, new methods of cooperation. I showed reconstruction timelines. The room became quieter with each slide. 1 generation, sometimes less. Disaster, recovery, expansion, repeat. The pattern spoke for itself. Then I reached the section Clara had specifically marked as important. The environmental crisis. 40 years earlier. A moment when humanity's own development threatened the stability of its homeworld. The projections appeared on the screen. Ocean collapse, agricultural disruption, mass displacement, resource instability, predictions made by experts, predictions supported by data, predictions that looked convincing. I let the delegates read them. Then I replaced those projections with current numbers. Recovery, reforestation, restoration, stabilization, improvement. A species that had stared directly at self-inflicted catastrophe and treated it as a solvable engineering problem. The room had gone completely silent, not because they agreed with me, because they were recalculating. I could see it happening. Civilizations spend centuries building models. Those models become assumptions. Assumptions become certainty. And certainty becomes dangerous when new information arrives. I closed the environmental file. Then I addressed the declaration directly for the first time. The Breath Dominion correctly notes that humanity possesses no military doctrine officially recognized by Council classification. Draven Kirsch smiled again, a small smile. Confidence. Certain. I nodded. They are correct. Several delegates looked surprised. Then I continued. What the declaration does not mention is that organized human resistance to existential threat predates spaceflight by approximately 14,000 years. The smile faded slightly. Every major challenge in our history produced the same response. I let the words settle. Humans treat extinction as a technical problem. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Sometimes we solve it quickly. I turned to another page. Sometimes we solve it badly. Another page. Sometimes we solve it after making the situation considerably worse. A few delegates actually laughed. The tension cracked briefly, then it disappeared. But eventually, I said, we solve it. I displayed the newest numbers from Earth. Volunteer registrations, infrastructure conversions, emergency coordination agreements. Data is only 14 hours old. The room stared. Registration systems overloaded within 6 hours. Unified command structures forming across political boundaries. Industrial expansion already approved. Emergency logistics networks activating. The declaration had existed for less than a day. Humanity was already reorganizing around it. That was the part that truly unsettled them. Not military strength. Speed. The speed of the response. I saw Ambassador Kale leaning forward. Councillor Bree watching carefully. Several younger delegates whispered to aides. Even Draven Kirsch no longer looked entirely comfortable. His hands remained folded. His posture remained perfect, but his eyes had narrowed. The calculations were beginning. Good. That was all I wanted. Not fear. Understanding. I closed the file. Earth is not requesting intervention. Silence. Earth is not requesting protection. More silence. I am providing information. I looked around the chamber. Every face watching. Every species is listening. I simply want every member of this council to possess accurate data before deciding what position they wish to take regarding future events. Then I sat down. Nobody spoke. The silence lasted almost 20 seconds, an eternity in a political chamber. Finally, Draven Kirsch rose to answer. His response was measured, professional, confidence. He argued that historical endurance did not translate into military capability, that surviving environmental disasters differed from interstellar conflict, that the breath assessment remained unchanged. The words were strong. The delivery was flawless. But something had changed. I could hear it. The certainty was gone. Only slightly. Only enough for someone who spent 11 years reading diplomats. But it was gone. And once certainty begins to crack, it rarely repairs itself. The session ended shortly afterward. As delegates filed from the chamber, conversations followed them into the corridors. Quieter than before. More thoughtful. More analytical. Less sympathetic. Less certain. The galaxy had arrived expecting to discuss humanity's defeat. Instead, for the first time, it was beginning to ask a different question. What if their calculations were wrong? The first intelligence revision arrived 20 days after the declaration. It did not come from Earth. It came from the Sorith Collective. That mattered. When the Sorith changed in assessment, people paid attention. They were famous for caution, famous for statistical rigor, famous for being so reluctant to alter conclusions that entire jokes had developed around their decision-making process. If a Sorith analyst admitted a mistake, it usually meant reality had become impossible to ignore. I was walking back from a committee meeting when a young Sorith aide intercepted me in one of Concord Station's central corridors. She handed me a sealed data chip. No explanation, no ceremony, just a polite nod before disappearing into the crowd. I waited until I reached my office before opening it. The report was short, much shorter than I expected. Their original assessment had estimated an 11% probability that humanity could establish meaningful unified command within 90 days. The revised assessment contained no new percentage. Instead, a single notation appeared beneath the calculations. Model framework may be insufficient for this species. I read the sentence twice, then a third time. After 11 years in diplomacy, I had learned that some documents reveal more through what they refuse to say. Sorith had stopped trying to predict humanity. That was new. Outside my office viewport, transport vessels drifted between station docking rings. Normal traffic, normal schedules, normal life. Yet behind those routines, the entire galaxy had begun adjusting its assumptions. The change was subtle at first. The way the weather changes before anyone admits a storm is coming. Requests for meetings increased. Questions became more detailed. Delegates stopped asking how Earth intended to survive. They started asking how quickly Earth was mobilizing. That difference mattered. Back on Earth, the answer was becoming difficult to comprehend. Claire's updates arrived daily, sometimes hourly. Every report seemed larger than the last. Volunteer enrollment numbers climbed faster than processing systems could handle. Governments that had spent years arguing over minor policy disputes suddenly shared information without resistance. Industrial networks merged. Research institutions coordinated. Transportation systems synchronized. The declaration had triggered something fundamental. Don't panic. Focus. Human beings possess an unusual ability. Most species become less efficient under pressure. Humans often become more efficient. Not always, not perfectly, but often enough to surprise observers. I requested another emergency session of the Council 36 days after the declaration. This time the room filled even faster. Nobody wanted to miss the update. The first session was about history. This session was about numbers. And numbers are harder to dismiss than stories. I stood before the chamber again. 212 representatives watched from the galleries. Many had arrived carrying assumptions. I intended to remove them. The first section of my presentation covered personnel. Simple, direct, verifiable. The Unified Defense Command had processed more volunteers in 36 days than the British Dominion's entire standing military contained. I displayed the figures. Then I stopped talking. Silence is useful when numbers are strong. For nearly a full minute, nobody spoke. Several delegates requested confirmation. Others requested the figures remain visible longer. I granted both requests. The numbers stayed on the screen. The room continued staring. Then I moved to industrial capacity. This section required caution. Raw manufacturing output can sound threatening if presented poorly. I was not trying to frighten anyone. I was trying to explain reality. Before the declaration, Earth's orbital shipyards had operated at less than half capacity. Commercial construction, scientific vessels, infrastructure expansion, normal economic activity. Within 2 weeks, every major platform had shifted to military production. Not through coercion, not through emergency seizure, through voluntary agreement, compensation guaranteed, coordination achieved, implementation completed. I watched several delegates exchange uneasy looks. One of the oldest assumptions in galactic politics is that large bureaucracies move slowly. Humanity had just demonstrated otherwise. Then I reached the section I knew would cause the most confusion. Games. The title alone generated visible reactions. Several delegates looked genuinely puzzled. One appeared convinced there had been a translation error. I continued anyway. For thousands of years, I said, humans have practiced competition through structured simulations. The chamber remained silent. As technology advanced, Those simulations became increasingly sophisticated. I displayed examples: strategic planning environments, logistical management systems, large-scale coordination platforms, conflict simulations, economic simulations, resource allocation simulations, millions of participants, sometimes hundreds of millions, entire communities built around mastering complexity. Delegate Pre of the Halveth Assembly raised her hand. I recognized genuine curiosity immediately. It is one of the easiest emotions to identify. Ambassador Voss, she said carefully, are you describing entertainment as military preparation? A few delegates nodded. They clearly wondered the same thing. No, I replied. I am describing entertainment that accidentally produced military preparation. The room became even quieter. Hundreds of thousands of humans entered the Unified Defense Command, already familiar with strategic planning, logistics management, resource optimization, and coordinated operations. I paused, not because they trained for war. Another pause, because they enjoyed solving difficult problems. Delegate Price blinked. That seems extraordinarily unusual. It is. A few diplomats laughed softly. Then I continued. Humans have a tendency to convert challenges into puzzles. The screen shifted. Recruitment specialization data appeared. 42% of new defense personnel possessed prior logistical or strategic experience. A significant portion acquired that experience through simulation environments rather than formal military training. The council stared, not shocked, not frightened, confused. Because confusion comes first when assumptions fail. I looked toward Ambassador Dravenkirsch. For the first time since the declaration, he no longer appeared confident, controlled, professional, disciplined. Yes. Confident? No. His hands pressed firmly against the desk surface. His posture remained rigid. His attention never left the screen. A diplomat can hide emotion. The body is less cooperative. The fourth section concerned industrial mobilization history. Again, I avoided dramatic language. Data requires no assistance. Historical records demonstrated repeated instances of humanity converting civilian production toward urgent objectives faster than external analysts predicted possible. Every case followed the same pattern: prediction, mobilization, acceleration, underestimation, repeat. The pattern stretched across centuries. By the time I finished, nobody was taking notes anymore. The delegates were simply watching, listening, thinking. The atmosphere felt different than it had 36 days earlier. The first session was about possibilities. This session was about evidence. Possibility invites debate. Evidence demands recalculation. Afterward, the corridors of Concord Station became more interesting than the chamber itself. Meeting requests multiplied. Trade representatives suddenly wanted discussions. Research organizations expressed interest in cooperation. Intelligence agencies quietly requested access to public human historical archives they had previously ignored. One message stood out. It came from Ambassador Kale. Officially, directly, no secret data chips this time. The Sorith Collective requested discussions regarding a mutual recognition agreement. Diplomatic language often disguises straightforward intentions. This one translated easily. Sorith wanted a relationship with Earth. Not later, now. I forwarded the request to Clara. A minute later her reply arrived. 4 words. I already expected this. I smiled, because so had I. The galaxy had started performing new calculations, and every calculation pointed toward the same uncomfortable conclusion. Humanity was not behaving like a young civilization. Humanity was behaving like something nobody had modeled correctly. That realization was spreading, slowly, reluctantly, but inevitably. And somewhere inside the North Dominion, analysts were beginning to see the same numbers. The question was no longer whether they would notice. The question was what they would do when they finally understood what those numbers meant. The first real crack appeared on day 41, not in the Breath fleet, not in the Council, not even in the negotiations. It appeared in an intelligence report. A short message arrived through my secure channel while I was meeting with a Soreth trade liaison. Priority 1. The kind of classification that bypasses every queue. I excused myself, stepped into an adjoining office, and opened it immediately. The message was from Owen Hale. Fleet Element Alpha has reached the staging point. Numbers confirmed. Ahead of schedule by 11 days. Attached were the revised capacity figures. I opened the file. Then I stopped moving. For several seconds, I simply stared. The projections were absurd. Not impossible. Worse. Achievable. That was what made them dangerous. Every estimate produced by Council intelligence services had assumed Earth would mobilize gradually. Every projection assumed friction, political delays, administrative inefficiency, supply bottlenecks, human disagreement. Instead, humanity had accelerated. The fleet now assembling across Earth's orbital infrastructure was nearly 3 times larger than the most optimistic Council estimate. Not 3 times stronger, 3 times larger. I checked the figures again, then again. Finally, I sent the file to Clara with a single word. Confirm. Her reply arrived 4 minutes later. Confirmed. We checked twice. The numbers are correct. I leaned back in my chair. Outside the viewport, cargo ships crossed the darkness between docking platforms. Everything looked normal. The galaxy looked normal. But somewhere between Earth and Breath territory, history had already started changing direction. The Breath Dominion had built its strategy around several assumptions. Earth was young. Earth was politically fragmented. Earth would require months to unify. Earth would struggle to coordinate large-scale military logistics. Earth would react. Earth would not prepare. Every assumption had failed. Not slightly, completely. The realization was beginning to spread. By day 44, I could see it on Concord Station. Nobody announced it publicly. Nobody needed to. Diplomats communicate through behavior long before they communicate through words. The Breath delegation changed first. Ambassador Draven Kirsch stopped attending informal gatherings. His aides stopped socializing. They worked late. I arrived early. I looked exhausted. The relaxed confidence that had defined them during the first weeks quietly disappeared. I watched it happen the way sailors watch, weather moving across open water. Steady, predictable, impossible to stop. 3 days later, the meeting request arrived. Private consultation, Breath delegation, priority status. I accepted. The meeting took place in one of the neutral conference rooms near the station's central axis. No ceremonial seating, no hierarchy, just a round table. A deliberate design choice. Difficult conversations happen more easily when nobody occupies the head of the table. I arrived first. Draven Kirsch entered exactly 3 minutes later. 1 aide accompanied him. No legal advisors. No military observers. That alone told me something. He sat down, folded his hands, looked directly at me. The Breath Dominion is open to discussing terms of resolution. There was the sentence. The first acknowledgement that their calculations might have been wrong. Not publicly, not officially, but privately. And private admissions usually arrive before public ones. I kept my expression neutral. Diplomacy rewards patience. I appreciate your willingness to discuss the matter directly, I said. His 6 mouths remained perfectly still. We would welcome an early dialogue. I understand. I hope Earth understands our position. I will transmit your proposal to the Unified Defense Command. That was all. 11 minutes. No threats. No accusations. No grand speeches. Just 2 diplomats sitting across from each other, while an entire interstellar crisis quietly changed shape. The moment the meeting ended, I filed the report. Clara contacted Me less than 2 hours later. They broke, she said. Not triumph. Not satisfied. Just observation. The way someone reports weather. They want negotiations. Yes. A pause. Then she continued. Owen's answer is no. I expected that. Still, I asked. Why? Because we aren't finished. I walked toward the viewport. The stars waited, beyond the glass. Silent, ancient, patient. Owen thinks negotiation, now, creates ambiguity, Clara said. I understood immediately. If Earth negotiated, before reaching full readiness, observers could claim the mobilization had been partially symbolic. A bluff, a pressure tactic, a demonstration. Future governments might convince themselves that Earth would always stop halfway. Owen wanted that possibility removed forever. He wanted the galaxy to see exactly what full commitment looked like, and then decide whether provoking it was worthwhile. Tell him I understand, I said. I already did. That sounded like Clara. The following weeks became a balancing act. One side of the equation involved reassurance. Several species had become nervous, not because they supported the breath, because enormous fleets make everyone nervous. Even defensive fleets, even justified fleets. History teaches caution. I spent long hours meeting with delegates who needed reassurance that Earth's objectives remained limited, specific, focused, legal. The second side of the equation proved more interesting. Commerce. Trade routes rarely care about political narratives. They care about probability, risk, cost, survival. And trade networks were voting, not with speeches, with money. Traffic through breath-adjacent systems collapsed. More than 70% of normal commercial movement disappeared. At first, analysts considered this temporary, a predictable reaction to uncertainty. Then something unexpected happened. The traffic reappeared, not in breath territory. Near Earth, shipping companies began rerouting voluntarily. Insurance firms adjusted risk models. Freight operators changed schedules. Independent corporations made identical decisions simultaneously. The message was impossible to miss. Commercial systems believed Earth represented a safer investment. That terrified the breath more than fleet reports. Military strength can be challenged. Economic confidence is harder to rebuild. The Soreth Trade Liaison explained it best. We met in a quiet observation lounge overlooking one of the station's docking rings. She reviewed several reports before speaking. 3 independent insurance authorities have revised breath risk classifications upward. No political pressure? None. Government influence? None. Pure analysis? Yes. I nodded. Insurance actuaries are among the least emotional people in any civilization. They do not care about pride. They do not care about politics. They care about outcomes. And their calculations had changed. The liaison folded her hands. Ambassador Voss, may I speak unofficially? Of course. She hesitated. A rare thing for a Soreth. We have studied emerging civilizations for centuries. I listened. We categorize them, model them, predict developmental behavior. She looked directly at me. Earth does not fit. I said nothing. You are too young to behave this patiently. Another pause. Too divided internally to unify this quickly. Another. Too inexperienced militarily to achieve this level of logistical performance. The stars drifted slowly beyond the transparent wall. She leaned back. You should not be what you are. I smiled slightly. That seems to concern many people. It concerns none of us. The answer surprised me. Then what is it? For the first time, she smiled. A small Soreth smile. Subtle, controlled. Interest, she said. Genuine interest. I left that meeting thinking about her words. Not because they praised humanity, because they identified the real issue. The galaxy was no longer afraid Earth might lose. The galaxy was trying to understand what Earth actually was, and that question was becoming harder to answer every day. Meanwhile, the fleet kept moving. Closer, larger, more organized, more prepared. And somewhere inside the Breath Dominion, leaders who had expected minimal resistance were beginning to confront a possibility they had never seriously considered. What if the Declaration had awakened something they could no longer control? On day 52, Earth confirmed full operational readiness. The message arrived before the morning cycle. No announcement, no drama, just a secure report from Owen Hale. All fleet elements ready. Deployment proceeding. Earth was moving. I read the message twice, then forwarded the necessary portion to Clara, though I knew she had already seen it. For a while, I sat in my office without speaking. There are moments in diplomacy when words become less important than momentum. This was one of them. The North Dominion had asked for discussion. Earth had continued preparing. The Council had watched. Now preparation has become a movement. By midday, every major delegation on Concord Station knew. Not because I told them, because fleets are difficult things to hide. Tracking stations saw the movement. Commercial sensors saw it. Military observers saw it. Human fleet elements were leaving Earth-adjacent staging points and moving toward the edge of breath space. Not rushing, not scattering, moving in disciplined formation, slow enough to be unmistakable, fast enough to remove doubt. The breath response came the next day. Emergency procedural review, prior claim protocol, filed under Council law. The breath had invoked an ancient legal mechanism to justify pressure against Earth. Now, when Earth used the rights created by that same mechanism, the breath wanted the mechanism reviewed. Council law allowed such a review. It also allowed the process to take 30 to 90 standard days. The intention was obvious. Delay. Freeze the situation. Create time for negotiation before human forces reached a position that could not be ignored. Counselor Bree called me that evening. Her face appeared in pale blue projection above my desk. "They are trying to use the procedural clock," she said. "I know. Can Earth wait?" "I will ask." I sent the inquiry through secure channels. Owen answered in less than 2 hours. One sentence. "We are not stopping." I stared at the words for a long moment. Then I sent them to Bree. Her reply was not immediate. When it came, it was only 3 words. "I understand why." That was when I knew the oldest members of the Council had finally begun to grasp the shape of human intent. Earth was not chasing revenge. Revenge is noisy. This was quieter, cleaner, more dangerous. Earth intended to create precedent. The Breath Dominion had expected a young species to plead for protection. Instead, humanity was building a legal and strategic boundary around itself, so clearly that no future power could pretend not to see it. On day 58, the first human fleet element reached the edge of breath space and established a defensive perimeter. The breath immediately called it provocation. Their communique was well written, precise, formal, clever, even. It cited Council statutes, claimed destabilization, warned of escalation, and described Earth's posture as excessive. I read it once. Then I opened a file I had prepared on the first day of the crisis. 3 independent legal analyses. Council recognized scholars, all commissioned 14 hours after the declaration had been filed, all answering the same question. What rights does a declared target possess under the prior claim protocol? Under existing Council law, Earth had the right to project defensive force to any point within operational range of the declared aggressor's home territory. The breath had handed us that right, politely, in writing, with official seals. I filed Earth's response before evening. No anger, no rhetoric, just law. The legal committee reviewed both submissions overnight. Their preliminary opinion arrived the following morning. Earth's position was consistent with Council law. The breath procedural review was suspended. Delegates who had been uncertain stopped avoiding me. Delegates who had been silent requested brief consultations. Even the species most nervous about Earth's mobilization now understood the deeper fact. Humanity had not merely moved fast. Humanity had moved correctly. On day 60, Draven Kirsch requested another private meeting. This time he brought 2 aides and a legal advisor. I brought Clara's latest briefing summary and a cup of cold coffee. The meeting room felt smaller than before, perhaps because everyone inside understood there was little left to say. Draven sat across from me. His 6 mouths did not smile, not one. For several seconds, he looked at the table. Then he lifted his head. The British Dominion is prepared to accept unconditional withdrawal, reparations on the terms Earth has specified, and formal public acknowledgement before the full council. There was not negotiation, acceptance. I had waited 60 days to hear that sentence. Instead, I felt tired, deeply tired, the kind of tiredness that arrives only when the body realizes it has been braced for impact for weeks. I kept my face neutral. I will convey this to the Unified Defense Command. Draven nodded once. His legal advisor stared at the table. One of his aides would not look at me at all. Something in that silence carried more weight than the words. This was the alien break. Not screaming. Don't panic. Not humiliation. Just a room full of people who had finally run out of ways to make their mistake smaller. The meeting ended in 17 minutes. Owen's answer arrived 40 minutes later. 7 words. We accept. Confirmation of terms to follow. I read it once. Then I closed my eyes. Only for a second. The ceasefire was signed on day 63. No parade followed. No celebration shook the station. Most of the work happened in sealed rooms, through verified documents, countersigned agreements, and carefully archived legal language. The breath declaration had been written as a forecast. Minimal resistance expected. The ceasefire became its correction. Complete withdrawal. Reparations. Public acknowledgement. Permanent renunciation of future prior claim action against Earth. I sat in my office after the signing and did nothing. For almost 20 minutes, I simply listened to the station. Life supports humming through the walls. Distant footsteps in the corridor. The soft vibration of docking clamps engaging somewhere far below. Normal sounds. Beautiful sounds. Clara called eventually. For once, neither of us began with logistics. She told me Owen had cried at the end of his final staff meeting. I believed it. Owen did the work, I said. So did you, Clara replied. I looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the fleet had begun standing down. People were coming home. Not all the way home yet, but turned toward it. That mattered. For the first time in 63 days, my office felt like an office again, instead of a command post disguised as diplomacy. I finished my cold coffee and opened the ceasefire document again. Not because I needed to review it, because I wanted to see the signatures. Earth's name stood there cleanly among old powers and older laws, not as a protected minor, not as a tolerated newcomer, as a party that had been challenged, measured, underestimated, and answered. I saved a copy to the permanent archive. Then I prepared for the acknowledgement session. The crisis was over. The lesson was not. The formal acknowledgement session took place 31 days after the ceasefire. Main chamber. Full council. Every recognized delegation present. I arrived early and took my seat in the human delegation section. For once, I did not open a file. I did not review figures. I did not rehearse arguments. Under my breath, there was nothing left to prove. The gallery filled gradually. Sorith representatives entered in silence. Halvath observers took their places near the academic delegation row. Councillor Bree arrived without aides. Old Councillor Gareth entered last, moving slowly beneath the pale chamber lights. Then Draven Kirsch walked in. The Breath Ambassador looked composed, but not the way he had looked on the first day. That earlier composure had been confidence. This was discipline. The session chair called the council to order at 0900 station time. Draven was called to the central floor. He stood. For several seconds, he did not speak. Then he opened the prepared document. His voice was steady. The Breath Dominion acknowledged that it had filed a formal declaration of hostile intent against Earth Sector 7. The Breath Dominion acknowledged that the matter had been resolved under agreed ceasefire terms. The Breath Dominion confirmed unconditional withdrawal. The Breath Dominion confirmed reparations. The Breath Dominion renounced any future claim under the prior claim protocol against Earth or its protected territories. Each sentence landed with the clean weight of a locked door. Draven finished reading. He lowered the document. Then he returned to his seat. No one applauded. The chamber remained still. Counselor Bree spoke next. She addressed the prior claim protocol with careful precision, saying the review process had already begun and would continue until the Council's oldest laws matched the realities of its youngest members. Delivered gently, sharp enough to cut stone. Ambassador Kale of the Sorith Collective followed. He praised the resolution as evidence that accurate information could correct dangerous assumptions before they became permanent disasters. That was diplomatic language, but I heard what sat underneath it. We misjudged them. We will not do so the same way again. Then the chair asked whether the human delegation wished to make a statement. I stood. The chamber turned toward me. For weeks, I had spoken with files, numbers, charts, histories, legal analysis, and careful restraint. I had explained Earth to people who believed they already understood it. Now the explanation was over. I had written a long statement. I had deleted most of it. The situation did not need a speech. Earth appreciates the Council's engagement throughout this matter, I said. Humanity remains committed to its responsibilities as a member of the galactic community. We look forward to productive relations with all Council members who choose the same. That was all. I sat down. After the session ended, delegates lingered in the corridors. The crisis had finished formally, but the real work was only beginning. The Sorith wanted recognition agreements. The Halvath wanted educational exchange. 3 smaller species wanted trade access. Several older powers wanted quiet reassurance that Earth's sudden visibility would not become sudden arrogance. I spoke with all of them, one conversation at a time. Gareth passed me near the observation deck. He did not stop. He only gave a small nod. I nodded back. That was enough between us. I stepped onto the observation deck alone. The transparent panels curved outward over open space, and for a moment the station seemed to disappear beneath my feet. Stars stretched in every direction. Old light, cold light, patient light. I stood there longer than I meant to. The last 65 days moved through my mind in fragments. 47 blinking. Channels. A sandwich left unfinished. Gentle looks in the corridor. Draven smiling with all 6 mouths. Clara saying Earth was not panicking. Owen Hale sending numbers that made old civilizations go silent. The fleet moving without haste. The Breath asking for terms after discovering that minimal resistance had become a very expensive phrase. And beneath all of it, the same misunderstanding repeated in different forms. They saw 80 years in space and thought they were looking at an 80-year-old civilization. They forgot the 14,000 years before the first human ship broke atmosphere. They forgot famine, ice, plague, war, flood, fire, collapse, recovery. They forgot that humanity had not arrived in space empty-handed. We brought everything with us. Not just machines, not just weapons. Memory, practice, fear, stubbornness. The old habit of continuing after the reasonable moment to stop. My comm unit vibrated. Clara, Owen says the last fleet element is at full stand down. Everyone is coming home. I read the message twice, then typed back, "Good. Tell him he did something worth telling people about." Her reply came half a minute later. "He says the same about you." I put the comm away. For a moment, the deck was silent. Not empty. Silent. There is a difference. Behind me, the council continued its endless work. Disputes, agreements, revisions, committees, conversations. Careful little efforts to keep a crowded galaxy from tearing itself apart. It was not glorious work. Most necessary things are not. I thought about Gareth's words, spoken weeks earlier in his quiet office. A species that knows it should be afraid and chooses not to stop. He had almost been right. Almost. Humans do stop. We stop to bury our dead. We stop to count the cost. We stop to make sure the people behind us can catch their breath. Then, when there is still work left, we move again. That was the part the galaxy had missed. Not courage. Not rage. Not dominance. Continuation. The refusal to let someone else decide where the story ends. My comm lit again. A new channel request. Unfamiliar delegation ID. A species I had barely spoken to before. I looked at the stars one last time. Then I accepted the call. There was work to do, and humans had always been very good at that.